I'm so excited to welcome you all to the first Purpose Meets Profit webinar on how B Corp certification can benefit your business. So I'm Max Hayes. I'm a growth manager with B Lab US and Canada. I use pronouns he, him, and I'm joining y'all from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on the homeland of the Lenni Lenape people. So a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce the team who will be helping me with the webinar today. So there is a live caption option available to you, but you will need to manually enable it on your end. And we welcome your questions on the content throughout the webinar, but please drop them in the Q&A box instead of the chat. And we're hoping to answer as many questions as we can live today, but any that we don't get to, we'll be sure to send out the answers in the follow-up email to this event. We'll also be sending out the slides that you'll be seeing today, as well as a recording of the event, so everything can be accessed after. Please take a moment to use the chat to introduce yourselves, connect with one another, and please be sure that your chat is set to everyone and not just the event hosts. So I'm joined today by my colleague, Carrie Ann Reeves, who is our Senior Associate of Growth at B Lab US and Canada. We'll hear from her later on in our session. And I'm also joined by my colleagues, Karen, Kel, and Joao, who will be helping us out with our tech today, as well as with the chat and the Q&A. And I'm also joined by you all, who are calling in from all over the US and Canada. And we're thrilled that you're interested in certification, leveraging B Lab standards, and beginning your B Corp journey. So first, I'd like to set the context that this webinar is intended for folks who are curious about what it takes to become a certified B Corp. And this is an introductory webinar designed to help you understand the value of certification and the journey to achieving it. And so this session is the perfect starting point for the companies looking to drive meaningful change. And here's our agenda for the hour. So we're going to cover the business case for certification, we'll go over the core requirements, and we'll better understand the B Impact Assessment and how to set yourself up for success from the start. I'll also do a live demo highlighting some key features, resources, and support available to you. We're also planning to save some time at the end for Q&A. Right. So let's just jump right in with why the B Corp movement exists and why companies want to join this impactful community. So B Lab was founded in 2007 and is the nonprofit behind B Corp certification. So we at B Labs are certifiers of certified B corporations and stewards of the B Corp movement. And our global vision at B Lab is to help foster and create an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system for all people and the planet. So when your company becomes a B Corp, you'll be joining a global community of leaders who are committed to not only being the best in the world, but the best for the world. And this certification indicates that you're part of a movement of companies who are committed to using their business as a force for good. And so the B Corp movement is here to offer a new operative system because the current system is broken. But instead of pointing to what's wrong, we want to uplift and hold accountable what's right. And so we're presenting viable alternatives for people to rally around. And we're working alongside other nonprofits, government leaders, thought leaders, and universities, all to help reshape capitalism so that it serves more and more equitably. So our economies don't need to be structured the way they are today. And in fact, the majority of employees and consumers are demanding businesses to change. And I think these statistics highlight the historic shift that we're seeing in the markets today. And while these are not the roles that businesses have traditionally played, the B Corp community has validated these sentiments and demonstrated that purpose and profit are not mutually exclusive. It's also important to emphasize that joining the B Corp community is a bigger play than just achieving certification. It's a movement, and we're in a historic moment of transitioning from capitalism that is primarily shareholder-driven to one that is stakeholder-driven, one where business decision-making takes into consideration the impacts of its workers, customers, suppliers, community, and our planet. So another way to look at this shift is to examine the certifications that are currently on the market. There's a logo land of certifications out there, at least for consumers shopping for products and businesses shopping for services. And while we depend on certifications to verify the practices of companies, B Corp sets itself apart by being the umbrella certification to tie it all together. So while the B Corp movement rests on the shoulders of the great certifications that already exist and continue to be developed, B Corp certification sets itself apart by looking holistically at the entire scope of a business's operations. So beyond the quality of the ingredients or the product itself, it's also the quality of the lives of those who made the product, what it took for that product to arrive in your home, or where the money that you're spending is ultimately being reinvested. It's a holistic capture of using business as a force for good. So here are a few quotes that capture the impact of B Corp certification and the B Corp movement. I'll pause for a moment so y'all can read these over. So now that we're grounded in who B Lab is and what makes B Corp certification unique, let's explore what the B Corp community looks like today. So I'm proud to say that today the B Corp community is made up of over 9,400 certified companies operating in 160 industries across more than 100 countries. And this is constantly evolving, but today we have a global movement that is growing rapidly. And it's important to call out that this is not just a US and Canadian centric movement. As you can see, there are actually more certified B Corps operating outside of North America. And we're witnessing the fastest growth in spaces like Europe and the UK. And so by becoming a B Corp, you would be joining this diverse global community of leaders who are committed to using their business as a force for good. So now let's talk about what do all these companies actually have to do to become certified. It's a complicated certification. However, at its core, all B Corps need to meet these three minimum requirements. First, you must meet a high standard of social and environmental performance by receiving a verified score of at least 80 points in the B Impact Assessment, which is our free impact management tool. Next, you'll need to solidify your company's commitment to accountability by adopting a legal framework that considers all stakeholders in the decision-making process. And Carrie Ann will shed some more light on this critical topic in a few slides. And then lastly, you must embrace a culture of transparency by making your score transparent on the public B Corp directory and disclosing any material risk identified during the review process. And we'll be sure to shed some more light on our risk standards later on in the slides today. It's also important to note that companies have to recertify every 3 years to ensure that the requirements above are still being met. So now that we have a sense of the certification requirements and who makes up the B Corp movement, let's shift gears to the value of certification. So in no particular order, here are some of the core reasons that companies certify. And before I flip to the next slide, I want to prime you all with several questions. So as I go through each of these benefits, I want you to think about, is this something your company is already doing well? Would certifying as a B Corp help you do this better? And who might be interested in this topic who's not in the session right now? So let's start with benchmarking and impact improvement. Certifying as a B Corporation isn't the ultimate summit, it's merely the baseline. And many companies point to benchmarking and improving their impact as one of the biggest values of certification. And these companies pictured here are examples of those that have continued to improve their score each time they recertify, even despite being recognized as some of the most progressive and responsible in North America. And so while going through the certification process can help your company capture its current impacts and get a baseline understanding, it's maintaining your B Corp status that turns certification into an ongoing impact management tool that encourages and guides you to continue to improve and integrate your company's mission across all departments. That's what it's all about. So when it comes to product differentiation and brand trust, we often say that B Corp certification is one of the best ways to show consumers that you're not just a company with good marketing, but a company that's actually doing good. And this is why third-party certifications are so important. And investors, job seekers, shoppers, and potential business partners don't just want to support good products or services, they want to work with good companies. And the B Corp movement has shown that purpose and profit are not mutually exclusive. And we're actually seeing that B Corps are having a competitive advantage in the market, from having faster growth in sales to outsized brand performance. And so one of the strongest drivers for our work at B Lab is the workforce. And our current certified community represents more than 1 million workers globally. And more employees are choosing to work for companies that reflect and embrace their values. And as a company level certification, B Corp allows good companies to be seen as good workplaces that measurably care about the well-being of their people. And so, like I mentioned, one of the core requirements for certification is adopting a legal framework that considers all stakeholders, which can also be interpreted as legally protecting your company's mission. And so corporate law is not set up to support purpose-driven company success. And if you asked us 10 years ago what the value of certification was, most companies wouldn't point to the legal requirement. However, over the last few years, specifically with fast growing, capital raising, and large companies, this is one of the top reasons that they certify and how they communicate about it once they do, highlighting the value of baking your company's purpose into its legal structure. So next up is the fact that B Corp certification can help you attract and raise values-aligned capital. And currently, the B Corp community has raised more than $2 billion in capital from a wide variety of investors, including the ones pictured here. And then lastly, I want to emphasize that while all B Corps are unique, and so are the reasons that they certify, there's one reason that they all share, and it's that they want to join a like-minded community of businesses who are holding themselves to the same standards and accountability. It's one thing to be aligned on purpose, but it's another to be aligned by practice. And B Corps are working collectively across borders to address society's most pressing issues and make a profit. The community is astounding, and the impact that they create continues to inspire us at B Lab to steward a global community of collective voice and action. So now that we've covered the core aspects of certification that our community members find most valuable, I'd love to hear from you all. And so we're going to launch a quick one-question poll about which aspect of certification your company is most interested in. You'll notice that there's an other option. So if you do select that, we'd encourage you to write into the chat which aspect you're most interested in that we didn't cover today. All right, we'll take a moment, get your answers in. We'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, just another moment here. All right. Let's see, can we share those results out? Awesome. Very cool. We're seeing a great diversity of answers. I love this. Thank you all so much for participating. Really cool to see what folks are interested in. And also thanks to those who selected other and put that in the chat. We know that certification has more value than what we covered here today. And so we hope that you're starting to imagine how your company can start to leverage these benefits to deepen impact and improve performance. So now that we're grounded in what certification is, the core requirements, and the value that folks get from it, I'm going to kick the mic over to Carrie Ann to dive into some of the core requirements in more detail.
All right. All right. Thanks, Max. So since this is an introductory session, we are going to spend the majority of our time unpacking the core requirements for certification and how to get started. So today we are going to zoom in on the light blue section of the roadmap that you can see on the screen. We want to make sure you know how to set up your company for success, understand the legal requirement, and know what tools and resources are available to help you get the necessary buy-in to move this work forward. So before we dive in any further, it's important to understand what and who should be captured within your B impact assessment and what industries or clients might impact your ability to join the B Corp community. B Corp certification is a company-level certification that is only available to for-profit companies who operate in a competitive market. This means that we do not certify nonprofits, governments, brands, company divisions, or departments. A critical component of determining eligibility for certification is understanding which entities you're trying to get certified, and thus which entities need to be represented in your assessment. We commonly refer to this as the scope of your certification. If your company is just one entity with no related entities, this is fairly straightforward to determine. However, if you have a parent company or you want to certify an entity that has wholly or majority owned subsidiaries, those entities will likely need to be included within the scope of your certification and assessment. When it becomes unclear which entities should be included in your assessment, or if your company just has a complicated organizational structure, we highly recommend that you go through what's called a scoping exercise with B Lab. If you believe that this exercise would be useful in your company circumstances, it is highly recommended because it provides a clear path forward to certification in terms of which entities will need to be included in the assessment, as well as which entities will need to make the necessary legal change. Through scoping, you will also be notified of any additional requirements that need to be met based on your company's complexity. For example, subsidiaries that certify independent of their parent company will need to make their assessment transparent on their public B Corp directory profile. If your company has over 100 million in annual revenue, you are automatically required to go through a scoping exercise and should email us as early on in the process as possible. You can email certify@bcorporation.net to request a scoping exercise. And you should note that there may be a fee associated with the process depending on your company's size. So once you've determined the scope of the business you're trying to certify, you'll want to make sure all relevant entities are eligible for certification. It's important to note that B Corp certification assesses a company's potentially negative impacts separately from its positive impacts, and the points you earn on our assessment will only be tied to your company's positive impacts. When pursuing certification, your business will be reviewed for any potentially negative impacts through B Lab's risk standards. Risk standards are additional minimum standards that companies operating in industries or practices with potentially negative impacts must meet to be eligible for certification. You can find a list of controversial industries on our B Lab Global website. If your company directly operates in any of the controversial industries that are listed on the website, you should review the corresponding PDF for the specific risk standards. Now, if your company has clients in the following industries, you may need to undergo a more in-depth risk review that could result in additional requirements to certify as a B Corp, or you may be deemed ineligible for certification at this time. Eligibility will be based on the level of involvement with the given industry and determined by the internal review committees. Importantly, companies generating more than 1% of their annual revenue from a client in an ineligible industry are not eligible for certification. Please see the Companies with Clients in Controversial Industries webpage for the exact pathways of eligibility. So for the purposes of B Corp certification, stakeholder governance refers to a company adopting a legal structure that supports decision-making in the interest of all parties affected by the company and its actions, not just those who have financial investment in the company. This legal requirement speaks to the long-term system change that the B Corp community hopes to achieve. B Corps want to create an economic system that is based on creating value for all stakeholders, like their communities, the environment, and their workers, alongside shareholders. A system that creates value for the many versus the few. And apart from sole proprietorships, every company pursuing B Corp certification must change their legal DNA to reflect this intention. However, the type of change required is going to be dependent on how and where your company is legally incorporated. The company will either need to amend your legal governing documents to include our specific language, or you will need to transition to benefit corporation status. If you haven't already, we recommend you use our legal requirement tool to understand what your company's requirement is, and then speak to your legal counsel, if applicable, about the process for meeting it and if and how it will affect your business. As an important note here, the companies with less than 50 employees must meet the requirement before certification is complete. For companies with over 50 employees, there's a short grace period. So as a relevant point of clarification here, while they're often confused to be the same thing, a certified B corporation and a benefit corporation are not the same thing. A certified B corporation is a company that has been awarded a third-party certification by the nonprofit B Lab. A benefit corporation is a legal structure that a business may choose to incorporate as if it is available in their state of incorporation. A certified B corporation may be legally structured as a benefit corporation, but certified B corporations can also be structured as LLCs, sole proprietorships, etc. Now, it is important to note that meeting the legal requirement is worth a significant amount of points in the B Impact Assessment, and it shows up there as the mission law question within the governance section. So as you can see on this slide, the points you can earn from the mission law question range from 2.5 to 10. Signing the B Corp agreement is something that all companies who wish to officially certify, regardless of their legal structure, must do. So at a bare minimum, every company will earn 2.5 points on this question. However, if your company is not a sole proprietorship and it has completed the given legal requirement, it could earn up to 10 points on this question. Please be aware that if you plan to utilize the aforementioned grace period to meet the legal requirement, you will not be able to receive the full 10 points for completing the legal requirement on your initial certification. This is one of the reasons we highly recommend that you have the necessary legal change either completed or well underway before you submit your assessment for review. And if you have any questions or concerns about the legal requirement, we have some great resources you can utilize, like the board playbook, which provides a deep dive into the case and process for adopting benefit corporation status. This is especially good for those who need to get buy-in from leadership regarding the change to benefit corporation as their given legal requirement. We also have a legal requirement webinar series where you can hear from B Corps about their experiences meeting the legal requirement. And if you are ever unsure or need more support, you can always contact us at certify@bcorporation.net. So for the next section, I'm going to pass it back over to Max to provide an overview of the B Impact Assessment itself, as this is where you're going to spend most of your time when pursuing certification.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for shedding more light on those core requirements, Carrie Ann. And just like Carrie Ann mentioned, if you do have any questions about those topics, we'll have some time at the end of our session for Q&A, and I'll also show you all how to find some additional support outside of this event. And so now I want to turn our attention to the B Impact Assessment itself, which at its core is a roadmap for using business as a force for good and a free impact management tool. And so I want to start off this section by sharing what some of our US B Corps have to say about what the B Impact Assessment means to them. So Ben Conniff from Luke's Lobster says that in many ways, B Corp certification is a measuring stick to see how we're progressing as an organization. We can't be perfect every day, but putting measuring sticks in place enables us to make incremental progress, and it's really meaningful. And then Rebecca McGee from Eileen Fisher said the assessment is a good mirror and gives us an objective reflection on who we are as a business. And I really like these quotes because I think it does a great job of showing that no matter where your company is in its impact journey, the B Impact Assessment can be a really helpful tool. So why does the B Impact Assessment actually exist, and what is its purpose? So first and foremost, it's a tool to help business leaders assess their company's positive impact on stakeholders across 5 key impact areas. And in all, there are approximately 250 questions in our assessment that examine your company's operational practices and impacts of your business model. Secondly, our assessment serves as a benchmarking tool to help you understand your business's impact, measure incremental progress, and compare your company to others. This can also help you identify which areas of your business have the most opportunity to improve performance and impact. And then finally, it's a framework for improvement and a North Star. So after you complete the assessment and have your baseline unverified score, you can leverage the assessment as a roadmap for continuous improvement. And the platform even has a goal function where you can flag specific questions you want to work on and get email reminders to check in on your progress. And when I get to the live demo, I'll be sure to highlight this functionality so y'all can see it live. So there are dozens of impact management tools in the market today. However, there are a few things that make our platform unique and more robust than others out there. So first off, our tool is both free and confidential, as we believe every business should be working to track and improve their impact across stakeholder groups. But more specifically, our assessment is one of the most holistic on the market. Not only does it analyze the impact of an entire business, but it analyzes that impact across 5 key areas, looking at your governance, your workers, your community, environment, and customers. Next up, our assessment is meant to be challenging, and our standards serve as an aspirational North Star to help guide and inform what kind of impact is both possible and needed. And this is represented through the current scoring system. So while it takes 80 points to become a B Corp, there's an uncapped number of points to be achieved. And currently, the highest scoring B Corp is a company called Dr. Bronner's, with a score of 206.7. So when it comes to certifications and other standards, we see that they're often limited to the specific industry that you operate in, like LEED certification for the built environment or global organic textile standards for the apparel industry. However, what sets B Corp apart is that our standard is for all companies and industries. And through the B Impact assessment and selecting the correct track, you'll receive standards that are tailored to your company's size, sector, and location, which I'll dive into in a moment. And then last, but certainly not least, is that our standards are consultative and grounded in community feedback. We're constantly evolving our standards to ensure that they continue to be a North Star and reflect industry best practices in a rapidly changing landscape. So when you log onto the assessment, you're actually viewing the 6th version of our standards, and we're getting ready to publish version 7 of our standards in the coming months. But I can confirm that no company will certify on these new standards until 2026. It's also important to note that version 7 represents the most significant standards update in the B Corp movement's history. So be sure to sign up for our newsletter to stay on top of the new standards development and rollout. So now that we're grounded in the purpose and the strengths of the assessment, it's important to understand how it's actually measuring impact across those 5 stakeholder areas. So the B Impact assessment measures both the operational impact as well as the impact of your company's business model. So questions related to operational impacts have to do with the day-to-day of running your business. They might assess the impact of your company's facilities, purchases, internal policies, or governance structure. But then there are questions in the impact business model section, which identify whether and how your company is designed to create a specific positive social or environmental impact for its stakeholders. So unlike the operational questions, impact business models, also known as IBMs for short, are rare and will not apply to every company. And they may be based on the company's product or service, a particular process or activity, or even the structure of the business itself. And so they are generally weighted more heavily in the scoring of the assessment than the operational impacts. And for more information, please refer to our knowledge base, which has some great in-depth articles on many of the impact business models that are available. Our assessment also includes an unscored section called the Disclosure Questionnaire, or DQ for short, which is designed to capture any sensitive or potentially negative impacts of the business. And the DQ questions aim to ascertain if your company has involvements in any areas of potential or real negative impacts that could hinder its ability to certify as a B Corp. So all DQ questions must be answered, even if they seem far-fetched for a company's business model. And even if you do select yes to some of these questions, that doesn't necessarily mean you're disqualified from being a B Corp. But upon submitting your assessment for review, your analyst will inquire further into the details of the severity and frequency of the impact, as well as how it's being managed. And you as the company will have an opportunity to demonstrate the efforts that you're doing to mitigate the associated impacts. It's also important to note that while these questions are related to risk, they are not the same as the industry risk standards that Carrie Ann covered earlier. So please make sure when going through the DQ to also reference those risk standards to make sure that you have a full picture of your company's ability to certify. So now that we know how the B Impact assessment measures impact, you might be wondering, well, how does B Lab compare the performance of a large multinational corporation to a sole proprietorship, or even across industries or different regions of the world? Well, this tension is addressed through the various tracks, which tailor the assessment to the size, sector, and location of the business. And so first off, we have our 3 components that make up our track. So we have your size, sector, and location. And so the size is based on a full-time equivalency calculation. And so if you're not familiar with that concept, please be sure to check out the knowledge base article linked on this slide. The next track driver is your company's sector. So while there are additional categories you'll see when you're creating your account, such as your industry, it's really important that you opt into the correct sector, as this will change your assessment significantly, not just in the questions you see, but also the scoring methodology. And then lastly is your company's location. So it might be natural to think that the location is where your business is headquartered or incorporated. However, B Lab actually defines the country of operations as the one where the majority of your employees are located, which may not be where you're headquartered or incorporated. And so the country of operations that you select will determine if you see a developed, developed global, or emerging market versions of the assessment. And for a list of which countries fall into each category, please see the knowledge base article linked here. So now we're going to shift gears and move into the last section of the webinar before we get to our Q&A. And in this section, I want to highlight some particularly powerful and helpful functionality within the assessment and show you some resources and support that are available to help you meet your goals and join this impactful community of using business as a force for good. And so before I jump into the live demo, I want to call out that if you're looking for similar content to this webinar, but you want to dive a little bit deeper, we have a short, free, introductory, on-demand course called Becoming a B Corp, which provides a great overview of B Corp certification in the process. So if you or anyone in your network is looking for self-serve introductory content, please refer to this course, which can be found on our website and linked in these slides. All right, so now we are on to the live demo portion. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen really quickly. We're going to shift over. So let's get this going here. One moment while I get all set up. Appreciate y'all's patience. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my other screen. We are going to start off by looking right at the B Impact Assessment itself. So when you log in, you'll likely be brought right here to the dashboard. So this is just my test account for the purposes of this webinar, but the dashboard is a great place to start whenever you log in because there's two features I really want to call out. First is this next steps feature. So oftentimes folks are like, you fill out the assessment, you get your baseline, but you're like, what do I actually need to do to hit submit and be ready? So this next step section will always show you what you need to do in order to actually submit your assessment for review to us. So that's a great place to start. Also, like I mentioned today, track is super important to get right from the beginning, and you can actually change your track details from here. So if after reading some of the resources in the webinar today, you realize, oh man, I need to update my track, you can do that all from right here on the dashboard. So where most folks are going to be spending the majority of their time is over here in the question filter. And this is where you're going to access all 250 questions across those 5 impact areas. And I want to direct your attention to this bar along the top here. So there's this option here called filter. This is a really powerful tool and how you can move around the assessment much quicker and get to specific information that you're looking for. So maybe you're just focusing on your operational impact right now. You can filter to just see operational questions. Or maybe you're curious, what impact business models am I opted into? You can filter for just those. You can also filter by impact area and even by point value. So the filter is a great way to help yourself navigate the assessment and not have to sift through all 250 questions every time you're navigating around. I also mentioned that the assessment's a great way to benchmark your performance to other companies, and that you could do that by selecting this benchmark feature. And you can see that for each impact area and even subsection within it, you can see how your company is measuring up to other companies in your same country, sector, or size range. So then within the actual questions themselves, I wanted to highlight a few functionalities. So as I mentioned, there's an opportunity to set goals and get reminders on those. That's going to be represented through this star feature, which you'll see next to each question. So if you decide to set a goal, you can go in, leave a little information about where you're wanting to be with your business. You can set a deadline for yourself and even receive email reminders on it. So again, if you're running a lean operation and you're looking for some help to keep you accountable, the assessment has some great functionality built into it to help you reach your goals and keep this work moving forward. I also want to call out there's this bookmark feature here. This is another great way to flag questions that you want to come back to, or maybe questions you're particularly interested in. And when you do bookmark questions, you'll see that under this reports feature over here on the left-hand screen, there's a report called the bookmark report where you can see all the questions that you've bookmarked. So it's a great way to flag questions where you know you need to go back, collect more data, and you can just find them all right here in this report. So I also want to call out that within every question you're working on, you'll also always see these two features under the title of the question, Learn More and Feedback. If you're ever unclear about what the question is asking or what it's getting at, I always recommend checking out the Learn More, and it'll typically provide you with some helpful context to help you understand what is this question actually getting at. Let's say you're still confused, you still don't know what the question is getting at. I want to direct your attention to the bottom right-hand corner, this little Get Help widget. So this widget actually connects directly to our knowledge base. So let's say, for example, you were struggling to calculate your full-time equivalency. You could just type in full-time and find articles that will help you determine it. And if you hit this little arrow here, you'll actually be brought directly into the knowledge base. Here you can find tons of helpful articles on everything that you're looking for. So if you're still struggling to figure out what a question is getting at or what a concept is after reading to learn more, the knowledge base is the next best place to go. Let's say you're still struggling, don't understand, want to connect with somebody at B Lab to learn a little bit more. You can also log a ticket with us directly through here. So if you're still needing more support or want to reach out, you can go ahead and log a ticket directly through this Get Help, and we'll reach back out to you as soon as we can. Okay, so now that we've covered all of that, I wanted to bring our attention back over to the reports section. So the report section has a lot of great features, like I mentioned, the bookmark report already, but I also want to call out this report called the improvement report. So this can be a great way. Let's say your company's already filled out the assessment, your score is sitting at about 70, and you're trying to figure out, how do I close that gap to get to 80 so I can apply for certification? The improvement report is a great place to go because it's essentially pulling all the questions where you haven't scored the maximum so that you're then able to identify low-hanging fruit and figure out what can we do to close that gap and get to 80 so we can certify as a B Corp. There's also a goals feature here to go in a little bit deeper and go more robust with those goal setting targets. And then I also want to make sure I call out under this tab here called the B Corp certification, B Corporation certification, you can find your fees and discounts. So this is a really common question we get. Folks want to know, well, what does it cost? What is it all about? So you can find what your fee will be based on your company's annual revenue. And all of our fees are listed transparently on our website, which I'll highlight in a minute. But what I really wanted to call out here is we also have discounts. So it's important to make sure to determine, does my business qualify for any of these? And make sure that you apply for them so that you can get those discounts on your fees. Okay, let's see. What else did I want to cover here? Oh, right. Very last, I just wanted to cover the questions you'll see at the very bottom. Why is my platform is not happy? So at the very bottom here under settings, why are you doing this to me? Can't seem to access it right now. There we go. Sorry about that, y'all. Okay, so here it is under settings. I wanted to call out the company details. This is a great way to give our team a little bit more insight into your business, specifically understanding your subsidiaries, facilities, and product and service overview. So again, no need to enter every individual SKU, but just providing some high-level information to help our team understand how your business is generating revenue, what are those key facilities, who are those related entities, will help speed up that review process once you hit submit. So spend some time filling out your company details page, but no need to go into super in-depth where it feels like you might be spending more time than needed. Also wanted to call out in the team members tab, the B Impact assessment is a great place to have multiple team members working together, and you can always invite other team members through this section or remove team members when they leave the organization. So now I want to direct our attention over to the B Lab US and Canada website. So this is our global partner region's website. So every global partner region has their own, and we have some really powerful tools here. And the main one I wanted to direct y'all's attention to is our resource library. So this is a one-stop shop for all of those resources that we've created for y'all, whether you're looking to leverage your certification once you are certified, but most of the resources are to help folks become certified. So let's say maybe you're looking for best practice guides. You could search best practices and find resources on this topic. So we can see we have some around engaging and retaining diverse workforces. Maybe we wanted to get more information on the legal requirement. We can find our guides around the legal requirement here as well. So if you're not able to find what you're looking for with the knowledge base or with the assessment itself, going to the US Canada website and searching the resource library is the next best place to find all the information you need. Also, I want to call out that under the Why B Corp, there's a section here called How to Become a B Corp. And this is where you can find great overview of a lot of the content we've covered today, including the fees associated with certification. So you can find all that publicly available on our website. You'll also notice there's a little Get Help widget in the bottom corner here, which connects to the knowledge base as well, and you can contact us directly through. And then lastly, I just want to call out that B Lab Global has their own website, which is our parent company. And if you're looking for those risk standards or things like the new standards development rollout plan, you'll find most of that content on their website. So if you go to standards, controversial issues, you'll find that page Carrie Ann highlighted earlier, or you can find more information about version 7 of our standards, which are planning to be developed soon. So that covers my live demo. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen again and pull up my other screen. Appreciate y'all. Okay, so let me share that one instead. Go. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, we'll be sending out the slides to this after. And so all of these resources I showed in the live demo are hyperlinked here on this slide so y'all can access them. And also, like I mentioned, there's a lot of ways to get support from us. So you can log a ticket, you can reach out to Certify at, you can actually schedule time directly with me if you want to connect live with a person. And we also have a whole network of trained B consultants, which can help you on your journey if you're looking for a little more hands-on support. So before we get to our Q&A, I want to take a moment to call out this awesome opportunity that is near and dear to my heart and very cool. So for the 5th consecutive year, B Lab US and Canada is accepting applications for the LEVEL program. And LEVEL is for businesses led by those who identify as women who have also experienced discrimination on the basis of race and ethnicity. And this program provides participating businesses with the resources they need to measure and improve their impact, tell their story, adopt stakeholder governance, and ultimately certify as a B Corp. And so you can find this year's application process linked here. There are a few changes to the application process compared to previous years, so please make sure you check out that webpage and read it over before you apply. And also just want to say that applications are open until March 25th. So if you yourself or if you know any entrepreneurs that would benefit from participating in this program, I cannot recommend it enough and would highly encourage y'all to sign up. Okay, so with that, I think we are ready for the Q&A. We're making great time. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen again, and I'll give Carrie Ann a moment to come back on and help us elevate to see if there are any questions that we can shed some light on here in the last few minutes.
Yeah, there's been a lot of questions, which is great.
Awesome.
It's a big range of topics as well. Um, there are a lot of questions from, I would say, smaller businesses that are asking about, is this possible for me? If I'm like the only person, or if we make, under $3 million, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So B Corp certification is designed to be accessible for all businesses, whether you're one employee with no money or a multinational with thousands of employees. So it's interesting to note that the majority of the B Corp community, more than half, are businesses making less than 5 million a year in annual revenue. So the majority of the B Corp community are smaller businesses. And oftentimes we see that, even if it's just you, one person, leading the charge on B Corp certification, it's totally possible to do on your own. It's really important to be intentional. Oftentimes, when you're just the one person working, you're wearing lots of hats, focused on many different things. So really having dedicated time set aside for B Corp will be really important. And if you do have other team members, it's really important to build what we call a B team. So maybe having, yourself as the leader of the organization, maybe a member of finance and HR to kind of help you work through the assessment and hold each other accountable. And then in terms of the actual cost for certification, like I mentioned, there are equity discounts available for our smallest companies, as well as those with diverse ownership. But the certification fee itself for companies less than 5 million a year in annual revenue is $2,000 a year. So again, there are those additional requirements, but what we've seen is that based on, the amount of work it takes and the price point for our certification, it's very accessible for our small businesses, but it does take that intentionality, doing that homework, and pulling all that information together.
Yep, for sure. I'm also seeing here there's some interest in how to build sort of from the ground up if the business is not yet, like active, sort of ingraining B Corp values into it from the get-go. And we do offer an offering called pending B status as well. And this is something that was created out of a demand for like startups and companies who are not yet operational or have less than a year of operations. It's something that can signal to investors and future business partners and consumers that you're going to become a B Corp once you're eligible and able. And that is something that we offer at like a way less strenuous, I would say, review process. It takes maybe like 6 months at most, whereas full certification right now is looking like 10 to potentially 12, depending on how big and complex your company is. So if you're interested in that sort of offering, definitely recommend checking out our website or just Googling pending B status.
Yeah, so true, Carrie Ann. And also, again, the assessment itself serves as a great framework. So even if the business doesn't exist yet, filling it out as if that business did exist, here's what I'm imagining it will be like. Going through those questions themselves will also really help you get a sense of how do you want to structure that business so that you're living into the mission and value. Also wanted to call out that the Yale Center for Business and Environment has a great article on an entrepreneur's guide to going B. So we don't have ourselves a resource that can directly speak to this, but I'll go ahead and drop in the chat the link to this article that I mentioned so folks can access that as well. So if you are early on in that journey, I recommend reading this article and still creating an account in the assessment and using it as a roadmap to kind of make sure you're setting yourself up for success.
Yep, for sure. Looking at the Q&A, well, it's like really all over the place a bit. So I'm trying to like find the common threads here.
No worries.
There are a couple questions about like, oh, we heard there are new standards and like when is that getting launched? Which are answered here, but if you want to voice that over.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about the new standards. Like I mentioned, they represent the most significant update we've had in the B Corp history, but I'm really excited because I think it's going to make it much more straightforward to understand what a B Corp is and is also continuing to be that North Star and making sure our community is staying up to date with best practices in the industry. So we're planning to launch those new standards early this year, around end of Q1. So we're really excited that those standards are going to be published. Again, while they're being published early this year, no company will certify on them until 2026. So we'll be publishing those standards and rolling out more material and educational content to help with that community transition. And the new standards companies will actually start certifying under them in the new year in 2026. So keep your eye out for those updates. Big news coming down the pipeline, and very excited to dive into those standards and see how our community adapts them and takes them to the next level.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a
Um,
great question here I want to touch on as well around the timing of the new standards. So for any companies that submit their assessment for review in 2025, you'll be evaluated against the standards you're seeing in the platform. So if your company's kind of already on the journey, you're thinking about hitting submit, wanting to get that done this year, so long as you hit that submit button this year, you'll be verified against the current standards. And like I mentioned, you have to recertify every 3 years. So when you were to recertify around 2028, you would need to meet those new standards. But just wanted to make sure folks knew if you submit this year, you're still going to be held against the current standards and you'll have a recertification cycle to then meet those new standards.
I'm seeing some questions about, let's see. Again, there's a lot of questions about companies that are small. Rachel's asking if we have any examples of less than 5 employee companies that have successfully completed certification, and how it went for them. And then I guess off the top of my head, I can think of we have a lot of consulting companies that are maybe less than 5 employees. Like it's frequently a remote dispersed workforce, and like there are maybe three consultants, two, even one sometimes. And they will go through the certification with that as their track. Usually it's like if there's just one working owner, it's a 0 employee track, which means the questions get weighted differently And the point values get weighted differently because there are no like workers per se. So that's something that the assessment takes into account when you're filling it out.
It's a great point. And
And
I
if
also just want to
yeah.
share my screen real quick and highlight one other thing. So we also have the B Corp directory. Can you see my screen, Carrie Ann?
Yep.
Perfect. So the B Corp directory is a great place to get a sense of what are the companies out there, and you can actually filter by size. So we can see 0 workers essentially means they're only working owners. So essentially, if there's you or you and a partner, and that's the only one in the team, you'll be on the 0 worker track. And we can see that there are 668 B Corps in the community on that 0 worker track. So if you are curious to see who are the other small companies in this space, using the directory is a great place to do that. And reaching out to these companies, most B Corps are so willing to share about their B Corp journey. So don't hesitate to reach out. Just say you're an entrepreneur looking to do this, want to hear a little bit about them. So that's another great way to leverage the directory to better see who are other companies in my industry, space, location, size, and how can I start networking with them before I'm a B Corp.
Let's see what else. Buh, buh, buh. There's a couple people asking about how do we know what's going to be used to validate our answers on the assessment. And that's regarding, I guess, the documentation that we request.
That's a great question. So a few things I'll say there. First, if you want to kind of get ahead of the ball and get a sense of what those things will be, the knowledge base will be that best place to do that research. So going into the knowledge base, just searching the word documentation, you'll find articles on documentation best practices, standardized documentation that's typically requested, and you can even see the review process will vary depending on your company's size. So the larger of a company you are, the more documentation you're going to need to provide. The smaller, the less. And so we actually have guides that will show what documentation you'll need to provide based on the size of your company, which can all be found in the knowledge base itself. Also, I wanted to call out that the review process is structured in a way where you'll be given time to gather that documentation. So our review process is essentially made up of 2 stages. And in between those 2 stages, the first analyst you're working with will kind of do a quality control, make sure you're on the right track, make sure you're prepared to go to that next stage. And after that, they'll say, hey, you have a few months or a month or so, like please gather this documentation. So we also have our review structured in a way to where you'll be asked to provide these things in a consistent, standardized way throughout the review, and your analyst will let you know what you need to provide when. However, I totally understand, especially if you're a small team, gathering documentation takes time and energy. And so we have a lot of articles on how to get ahead of that. And you can also always reach out to us if you're needing more support or have questions about specific pieces.
Let's see. So would there be?
Yeah, I can just gonna say, let me just show really quick. I'll just demo real quick for folks in the knowledge base where they can get more insight into the documentation and the review process. So like I mentioned, we have 3 different approaches for companies depending on your size: small, medium, medium or large. And so when you go into the knowledge base, you can actually find articles like this one pictured here that will explain what happens during each stage of the review process. And you can see here for our small medium companies, what kind of standardized documentation is requested of you, which would be, we have a template we'd ask you to fill out where we're going to gather information on your workers and suppliers. We're going to ask for your P&L statement, employee handbook if you have one, supplier code of conduct if you have one. So again, if you're wanting to get ahead of some of this, the knowledge base has all of it, and you can always start digging that up yourself and getting prepared before you hit submit or as you're working your way through the review process.
Um, Someone had asked if it's possible to like stack discounts for the certification fee. And I'm here to let you know that there will be one discount applied to you if it is eligible. And it'll be whatever the highest one is. So let's say you're someone who comes from a background of racial or ethnic um, identity that you face discrimination for. Um, that would be the type equity pricing A tier, and then that would apply to you, even if you also identify as like the B tier. So it would just be the one. And all of those guidelines can be found within the B impact assessment in terms of what is qualified for what.
Appreciate that, Carrie. And yeah, we'll always try to give you all the highest discount we can.
Someone asked what aspect of the assessment do you find hardest to achieve?
It's a great question, and it does really depend on your business. In my experience, right, companies that have more of an environmental focus, maybe you're an environmental consultant or selling recycled plastic products. Typically, those kind of companies are really easily flying through the environment section, have that together, but maybe struggle a little bit more with the community section or the worker section. So there is some variability depending on the industry and expertise of your business. One piece I will say that we talked about a lot today is the legal requirement, which is captured in the governance section. So especially for smaller businesses, the governance section might feel overwhelming because you're like, well, I don't have a board or this doesn't apply to me. But it is really important to still like wrap your mind around these principles and because the legal requirement, again, like we mentioned, requires you typically have to go change your articles of incorporation or reincorporate your business, that's kind of can often be the biggest hurdle companies face in their journey. So while each section has its own challenges depending on your industry, that legal section, that legal requirement in the governance section is really a big hurdle folks need to get over. So really recommending you leverage the resources we called out today. The board playbook is amazing. The webinars are a great opportunity to hear from other companies and their experiences of what it was like. But like we said, you will need to get your own legal counsel. You will need to make sure your investors, your shareholders, everyone's on board. And so we really see companies spending a lot of time there, being very intentional about making sure everyone's aware of and why we're making that change.
Um, let's see. I think we have 2 minutes left here. So, um, last one might be, mm, do you find that businesses, once they get the certification, makes a notable difference in their revenue or customer trust or business at large? I think we'll end on that.
That's a great question, a good one to end on. So on a whole, like we showed in the presentation today, we do see that B Corp certification gives folks a competitive advantage from having faster growth in sales with certain markets and then also having outsized brand performance. So especially with younger consumers, millennials and Gen Z, we're seeing that they're voting with their dollars. They're wanting to put their money into companies that believe in their values and share their vision for the future. So I will say brand loyalty is a big piece of that. One other thing I always love to tell folks is that B Corp certification is a lot like college. What you put in is what you get out. So if you show up and you do the bare minimum, those impacts that you mentioned, those positive things may not be as realized as fast as you want. So even once you are certified, still takes intentionally to get involved with the community, network with other businesses, join our educational content. So I'm not going to say that this is the silver bullet that will double your sales overnight or give you a brand new audience to sell to, but we do see that the data shows B Corp's having a competitive advantage. And if you're truly investing in this process with authenticity and passion, I personally believe that businesses do realize those gains, even though it may not be overnight or immediate. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carrie Ann, for elevating those questions. Y'all had awesome questions, and I really appreciate everyone taking that time out of their day today to share more with us about what you had going on. And we're really looking forward to continuing to work together. So we're also going to have a brief survey that will pop up after we close this webinar, and we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to share your thoughts with us, as your input helps us create an even more impactful experience in the future. But have a great rest of your day, everyone, and thank you so much.